I believe it's episode 63.
Yes. And you are back from Japan, aren't you, Rob?
I am been back about a week or so.
Okay.
Had various things going on. Today's actually the first day of rest I've kind of had. I had all sorts of things going on for essentially the entire week. Normally, I would like after an international trip, even one where there's no jet lag. Like for us, Japan, there's no jet lag. Even after I would have like preferred a day to rest, but that's not the way things were going to be until today. So anyway, feeling a bit better now, having actually able to have a bit of a quieter day and a bit of rest and maybe start a little bit of unpacking too. So anyway, yes, I did. You were asking about any sort of final thoughts of for Japan. So this has been my second trip to the country, and I guess in total I've spent about sort of 3 or 4 weeks there, something along those lines. Um, I went to Tokyo towards the end of the trip. I actually flew into Osaka this time, as I mentioned previously.
Hmm.
Was in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Then I actually flew back to Narita, which of course is a city near Tokyo where the airport is. And going into Tokyo for a couple of days, I was struck by, I think it was really more visible this time, how bright Tokyo is. Admittedly, that's
Hmm.
more in the center of the city,
Yeah,
no doubt, but how
right.
bright it is, how much faster it is than other parts of the country. I mean, if you talk about, say, Hiroshima, which is, I think, 1.1 million people, so still a sizable city, there's
Yes.
a lot going on, but it's not quite so bright, whereas in
Hmm.
Tokyo, there's huge signs with animated signs going on and so forth. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting. I think people are definitely rushing around more in Tokyo. It's a larger city. It's a very large city, but it just struck me this time compared
Well,
to
yeah, exactly. Like as big cities in general tend to be.
exactly.
It's not somewhere I was always fond of going to. It's more like Tokyo always seemed more like a conduit to other places I had to go whenever I was traveling across when I'm taking the train and or even sometimes even buses. I'm usually trains more, but
Yeah.
so yeah, it's kind of almost sort of a disconnect with the rest of the country in some ways, right? I'm not saying that there aren't other bigger metropolises in Tokyo. I'm sure Osaka's got its semblance of busyness there as well, but Tokyo's pretty unique. It's like a com total and complete um, uh, bloodstream of mind your own business, influx of people and so forth. Yeah, it's amazing what a city can, like a big city can do to isolate its, to differentiate itself from the rest of the country, to be sure. It's like getting a bit off topic. Like there's a friend I had who went to Russia for some kind of school. I don't remember if it was like a school program or some kind of an organizational thing. But he went to Russia, and it is only in Moscow where he found the people who sucked up to the state, and
Mhm.
basically were kind of having a very sort of a communist kind of mindset. But the rest of the places are all free, are mostly freedom lovers of some sort.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, so that's the impression he got, which I'm kind of taking to heart. So.
Yeah. In fact, in the case of Russia, I've never been to Russia, but I understand, at least during the Soviet era, and I think even more recently, access to Moscow was a bit restricted too. So people had to
Mm.
sort of it was a sort of privilege to get to live there. But yes, I think you generally find probably people in the country are probably more likely to have that individualistic streak, aren't they? Probably true in every country.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. At least culturally relative, because obviously some cultures aren't as individualistic as others.
Of course,
But
yes.
yeah. Anyway, yeah. So I like Tokyo, but it's a bit big for me. I prefer actually other cities. I know I only spent a very short time in Osaka, so I don't really want to sort of pass judgment on it till I've had a chance to spend. It was less than a day. I was just going somewhere else, and it was just the timing meant that I had to stay overnight. Um, but so I don't really want to judge it, but I prefer the smaller cities where I think you can still you get that full experience of the Japanese food and the culture and so forth without necessarily having to rush around,
Yeah.
as much as you would in Tokyo. The Tokyo Metro. So I've traveled a bit around the world, and the Tokyo Metro is, well, as would befit a city of 37 million or 43 million, depending on how you define it. It's enormous and it's complicated, and it's interestingly enough also changing all the time
Mm,
because you can't just assume that if trains are running, one particular train's running at a particular time, it will necessarily be running, a few hours later, or that you can just jump on the same train and go back. So I found Google to be absolutely essential, Google Maps to be absolutely essential to navigate the subway system there, the metro system there. So.
right.
Um, but yeah, it's probably having grown up in sort of city of about 2 million. It's probably, as I said, a bit big for me, but I think younger people too would probably really like it. Um, I'd say the next most complicated metro system I've seen was the Paris metro system, which is kind of a bit of a hodgepodge and I think was developed over the space of 100, 150 years and sort of reflects that a little bit. But anyway, it was, I mean, the Tokyo metro certainly works really well, gets you around. I do want to say one thing about this topic, actually. So if you're flying into
Yeah.
Narita, if you're flying so Tokyo has two airports, of course, Haneda, which is closer, and
Mm,
Narita. If you're flying into Narita, which quite a lot of airlines do, and you want to get into the city, it's about sort of 50 or 60 kilometers or something. And if you, there's something called the Narita Express, and I took it the first time I went. So it's
mm,
essentially just a train that runs on the regular train lines, but takes you straight into Tokyo Station, so you don't have to worry about any of the other stuff. I'm not sure I would again, though. There's a little bit of
really?
complexity involved in booking it, and if you can grok the regular trains a little bit, I think
Mm,
maybe they might even be a little bit. They're certainly a lot cheaper, and they might even be a little bit more convenient, actually. So this time I went in and out from Narita a couple of times, and just was able to work out regular trains to do it. So I'd encourage anybody doing it to. And previously, I'd encourage people to use the Narita Express, and maybe not so much now. I'm thinking if you can manage to sort of get your understanding of those of the train system, the train system is a lot cheaper and probably even a little bit easier to deal with actually once you understand it.
right.
Did I mention IC cards last time?
I don't remember.
Okay, so I'm actually going to write something up on this because as far as I can tell, I haven't found much in the way of information on IC cards in English.
Mm,
Now, maybe I've just missed it, but okay. So IC cards are essentially primarily travel cards. So a lot of countries they have something like this, but the difference in Japan, at least compared to what I'm familiar with, is that they're run by private companies, and the private companies are actually kind of based in different areas. So there's one called Ikoka, for example, that's in
mhm,
Hiroshima. There's another one I think it's called Suica, which is in Tokyo. But I don't know if they're still doing physical Suica cards. I think it may be some sort of electronic card now.
yeah.
The cards will work throughout the country because of the government mandated standardization. So you can take your Coca card from
Mm,
Hiroshima and use it in Tokyo and charge it in Tokyo and so forth.
right.
But you can't buy one in Tokyo. You would have to buy a Suica card in Tokyo. But once you've got one of these cards, you can charge them up and use them for most transport, and they're really, really useful. Interestingly enough, you can actually use them to buy things as well. I accidentally, on my last day in Japan, I accidentally bought something with my IC card instead of a credit card, and it
Oh,
worked. I just pulled it out of my wallet and tapped with the IC card, not thinking about it, and,
oh.
and the money came off instead of the credit card, which was fine. But it is useful to know. So
Mm,
I would encourage anybody. I didn't find a lot of information, as I said, in English on IC cards. If you get to Japan, if you come into Tokyo, you'll probably have to buy a Suica card. As I said, we didn't find any physical cards, but it looks like they're electronic now. But in other parts of Japan, you can get the physical cards. Get yourself an IC card as soon as possible and use that to navigate the public transport system. It makes things much, much simpler. So.
mm,
I will actually be writing something up on that, as I said. So
sure.
occasionally I put general information on Wiki for Men, so I think I may actually put an article up on that
Okay.
just for
Mm,
the benefit of anyone who wants to see it. Yeah,
yeah.
so highly recommend it. Get yourself an IC card, and it's useful throughout the country. Actually, the rules change on use of IC cards in different cities, so make sure you know. So, for example, if you're using an IC card in most parts of Japan, you tap off on, say, a streetcar,
Mhm.
but in Nagasaki, you tap on and tap off. So you need to know these things. Because the first time I went on a streetcar in Nagasaki, I didn't tap on because you're not supposed to. Or at least, I mean, I didn't think it was, you're not supposed to anywhere else. And I asked a Western guy who was there, and he said, "Oh, actually, you're supposed to tap on." So I quickly tapped on. So, but just so you know, yeah. So bit of complication there, but once you get your head around it, it's pretty easy to deal with. But as I said, I'd be interested to know. You'll probably find lots of information on Japanese sources, Vernon, but English, I
Right.
haven't found much. So
Gotcha. Well,
anyway.
it's a good thing I mentioned because I was not sure what an IC card was until I just looked it up right now. So,
I mean, I know you haven't lived in Japan for quite a while, so they may well be something that's appeared more recently. In fact, for what I understand, it used to be that they didn't standardize across the country, and in 2013, the Japanese government mandated that. So at least they
mm,
now work everywhere. So I think that they may, yeah, be a little bit older than that, but not much. So yeah,
right.
so there you go. And I don't know where the name IC comes from, and I don't know what they're called in Japanese. So there you
Yeah.
go.
Right. Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, essentially, I guess that's all I wanted to say about Tokyo. That lovely, highly encourage people to see it. There's a lot to see in Tokyo. It is absolutely enormous. The population of Tokyo is approximately, well, even conservatively, 1.5 times the population of Australia in a single city. So, and it just goes on and on and on as you say you go out to Narita, you just see
Right.
this, yeah, conurbation of sort of territory, occupied territory going, with people living there right out to the airport. So, yeah, Narita is actually a nice little city. It's I was kind of interested to because last time we just sort of went straight through it. The plan this time was to actually spend a little bit of time in Narita, and we spent about half a day there, just having a look around. It's quite a small city and very easy to navigate, and it is on the on the metro system, and it's on the JR Japan Rail, so it's easy to get to as well. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, yeah, it was a nice little city. So. As always, yeah, Japanese food is fantastic.
Of course.
Yeah, really loved it. Everything's safe to eat, and the water's safe to drink, and as one
Yeah.
would expect from an advanced economy. And it was the reason I mentioned that in particular is one place I went, I think it was in Nagasaki, had little things on the tap saying water is safe to drink, and of course it is everywhere in Japan. So,
Mhm.
but anyway, I gathered that was just for tourists from some parts of Asia where maybe they weren't familiar with that. So,
Yeah. Right.
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So, yes, that's all I had on Japan, I
Mhm.
think. I've got, I was going to briefly mention a few wars, always a happy topic. But before that, I've got Great Men of History, and I think you've got a few topics, Vernon.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see if they're appropriate for bringing up at a given point. But you
Okay,
can,
yep.
yeah, start off with the Caesar.
All right, no worries. Yes, so today's great man of history is Gaius Julius Caesar. So I'm making a point of kind of picking people from different strands. As I said, I think I picked
Mhm.
too many German physicists and mathematicians for a while, so I'm going to pick them from different
Yeah.
parts of the world and different strands. I thought he might be an interesting character, a little bit different to what I've done before. His first
Hmm.
name was Gaius. Most people don't know that. So that was his
Right.
personal name.
Yep.
Romans had three names. So yes, his was Gaius Julius Caesar, which indicated his tribal background and so forth. So and family background. So I think the family was the Julii. Anyway, so the term Caesar, of course, came to be used as a leadership term, but that was only as a result of Gaius Julius Caesar.
Right.
So
After fact. Yeah.
yeah, so but Gaius to his friends. So
Hmm.
anyway, he was highborn as a patrician. For those who don't know, amongst Roman citizens, and it's kind of interesting actually because Roman citizenship was the height of the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire. Eventually, it was given to everybody in the empire, but for a long time, it was the height of the empire, and it's the height of the aim of everyone was to become a Roman citizen. But interestingly enough, at times it carried with it kind of obligations and stuff, and there were a lot of Roman citizens who weren't doing that well. So, but it was quite common for for non-Roman citizens to spend 20 years in the Roman army, and the reward for 20 years service was Roman citizenship. Now, I'm going to mention something that I've mentioned before a few times, but it never hurts to mention it again.
Okay.
Uh, this life expectancy at birth historically is a very misunderstood concept. I have read that life expectancy at birth in the first century in the Roman Empire was 21. But that doesn't mean that there are a bunch of 21-year-olds dropping dead.
Yeah.
What it actually means is that infant mortality was very high, and that people who there were young people who died, as indeed still happens, in the modern era, but and it was more common then. But plenty of people lived into their 50s, 60s, even 70s. My general view is that we've added about 20 years of real life expectancy, adult life expectancy. So as a general rule, I think if you see people, in their 70s, 80s now, that's kind of where you would have seen people in their 50s, 60s through much of history. So not many people would have made it into their 70s. Yeah, you probably met most of us, most people at the line had probably met somebody who was in their 70s, but it wasn't something you saw regularly. And people in the 80s were pretty rare, and you wouldn't see too many people in their 90s, and I can't recall anyone historically, any verified historic figures of anyone making it to 100, but maybe there may be some. But I think generally speaking, we've added about 20 years of real life expectancy. So I just want to make a point on that because this idea that aside from the fact that we've got lots of other proof of this idea that people would spend 20 years in the Roman army to become a Roman citizen would simply not make any sense if people were dying in their 30s and 40s, right? Because people
Right.
would tough it out, or either not make it, or would just get the citizenship and then die. So obviously that's not going to be a
Yeah.
common arrangement, common thing. So anyway, yeah. So these guys would maybe join the army when they were 12 or 15 or something. By their mid 30s, they've achieved Roman citizenship, and they might enjoy, the next 20, 25 years of their life as a Roman citizen, and that was worth that to them. So anyway. But among Roman citizens, there were two groups, the patricians and the plebeians or plebeians. And that's where the term pleb comes from, of course.
Yes.
So even amongst Roman citizens, most of them were plebeians. And that was the lower class. And even, so these people were Roman citizens. So in the Republic or the Empire, they had a high status. And yet within Rome itself, they were the commoners, with the
Mhm.
patricians being the more powerful group, generally speaking. Anyway, Gaius Julius Caesar was from a patrician family, but his family was not wealthy, at least at the time of his birth. And this sort of parallels what you see with quite a lot of aristocrats in, say, the UK over the last 100 years or so, where there's quite a lot of them. They're aristocrats, but they kind of run out of money actually, and a lot of them
Mhm.
will end up selling their houses and so forth. But what's particularly interesting about this is Gaius Julius Caesar. He went on, of course, to become very wealthy in his life. So he's mostly a self-made man. So anyway, to get on, that was
Well,
what's the background. Go on.
yeah. Well, what did he do to accrue that?
Right. So
Yeah.
that's that. I'm glad you asked.
Yeah.
So he's mostly known for, I've got a short list. He's mostly known for conquering Gaul, Gaul, of course, being mostly France. Gaul was actually a little bit larger than modern
Well,
France, but he
okay. Right.
conquered Gaul. He actually doubled the size of the Republic in doing so, actually, which is kind of interesting and impressive. Um, he crossed the Rubicon. So I'm going through the list of things that he was famous for. Second one is he
Mhm.
crossed the Rubicon. I'll get onto
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Uh, Getting it on with Cleopatra. He's remembered for that, and
Right.
getting murdered on the floor of the Senate. So I'd say those are the four sort of main things that he did that he's remembered for. And they're not the things I'm actually going to focus on that make him a great man, but except arguably maybe the first, conquering
Mhm.
Gaul. But other than that, I've got other items I want to talk about. But
Sure.
okay, so he conquered Gaul. And I said, it doubled essentially doubled the area of the Republic. So now the Republic of Rome had twice the area under its control as it had before he did that. But he kind of, I don't know if he made a mistake. He didn't get approval for the war. And the way it worked in Rome is
Mhm.
generals had to get approval, such legal authority from the Senate to go to war. He didn't. And this presented something of a problem. It was technically an illegal war, but he had, of course, conquered a massive area. Now, in doing so, this is where the wealth comes in because this is actually fairly well the case up until the modern era. Generally speaking, historically, there wasn't much division between personal wealth and public wealth that might be under your control. So, from our perspective, this essentially means most public roles were pretty much an excuse to line your own pockets. And that was not only expected, in many cases it was legal, and that was how it was meant to be done. And a lot of positions historically didn't necessarily give you a very much of an income because they understood that you'd line your own pockets while you were in this role. And this was true even up to say up to the 16th, 17th centuries with some of the roles in the UK, where you'd be given sort of a major project to construct a building or something, and it'd be understood that you'd pay yourself a reasonable salary, and by reasonable we mean huge salary out of the money that the state had given you to in this construction project. In some cases, actually, people were on the hook personally, actually, for if the project went over budget. So essentially, the entire thing got merged into their personal finances, and if they, as long as they managed it well, they'd come out stinking rich. But if they did it badly, they'd be in big trouble. So anyway, this is what happened to Julius Caesar. He and all of his soldiers, conquered Gaul, and they took wealth and they took slaves, and this all made them. He became extremely wealthy, and all the soldiers that participated pretty much became wealthy as well. By the way, the one of the interesting consequences of this was the price of slaves crashed. There were so many slaves from Gaul that slaves became actually almost not quite worthless, but they were a lot less valuable than they were previously.
Right.
And this apparently happened in the Roman Empire and Republic, where the price of slaves would bounce up and down based on conquest
Yeah.
and so on. But this is where most of his wealth came from, and so by the time that he conquered Gaul, he was very wealthy. But there was a bit of a problem. As I said, it was an illegal war, so that meant that he was going to be prosecuted for having committed, even though he'd actually made the state extremely powerful and wealthy.
Hmm.
His political enemies were going to use this as an excuse to prosecute him.
I see.
But
Yeah.
but like modern roles, in fact, I think this is where we got it from in the modern era. As a person holding public office as he did at the time, I think he was a governor. He had a governorship, and he was also a general. He couldn't be prosecuted while he was in office. He could only be prosecuted once he left office. So he was actually hunting for, he had a bit of a problem. He was hunting for another political role to protect him from prosecution. But in order to do that, he had to go to Rome to get the office. But to go to Rome, he had to surrender his generalship, which meant he became
Hmm.
a private citizen and subject to prosecution. So a
Right.
bit of a catch-22.
Yeah.
Go to Rome to get the governorship, get prosecuted before you get the governorship, right? So he came up with a novel solution for this. And the novel solution was invade Rome, pretty much. So the way that Rome worked was the Republic was constantly fearful that the generals would essentially invade Rome and install a dictatorship. And this had actually got worse in the 50 or so years before Caesar took command. And the reason was something called the Marian reforms. And it used to be that, as I understand it, there used to be that the Roman soldiers owed more allegiance to the state. But about a few decades before this all happened, they reformed the way the army worked such that the generals were responsible for essentially guaranteeing the salary of the soldiers and the fact that they would walk away from the campaign with a decent amount of money. This, of course, caused soldiers to be loyal to generals more than the state, which immediately opened up the prospect of coups, made it much more likely. So anyway, the Roman state had a rule. There's a river called the Rubicon River in Italy, and if you cross the Rubicon River at the head of an army, that's taken to mean you're planning to invade Rome. And Caesar camped north of the Rubicon, which is perfectly legal, for quite a while, and he seems to have been thinking about what to do. In the end, he crossed the Rubicon at the head of an army, which of course is we get the saying crossing the Rubicon, as in you're taking the step which is now can no longer be reversed. You've made the decision to go forward and try to achieve whatever it is you're trying to achieve, and you can no longer go back because it's a one-way door. But one of the things I find interesting about this is we've got not one but two different sayings come out of this particular action. The die is cast. That is apparently what he
Yeah.
said in Latin when they crossed the Rubicon. So we've got both the die is cast and crossing the Rubicon as sayings out of this one action. Anyway, he went on, of course, and effectively marched the army into Rome. The rest is well established by history, and is a common story that people hear. But later on, I'll quickly go through these points, but then get on to what I think is actually the more interesting stuff about why I consider he's a great man of history. Obviously, conquering so much territory the way he did, very impressive. Doubling the size of the Republic, very impressive. But that's, anyway, I think that there's more. He's left some other legacies, but which we'll get onto. But yeah, he obviously ended up in a relationship, excuse me, with Cleopatra.
Mhm.
They had a son who was murdered, I believe, in the end because he was a threat to Augustus, who Augustus, of course, was for those who don't know, was the great nephew of Julius Caesar, but Julius Caesar adopted him. Romans had used adoption in a way that we don't. They had the concept of adoption, but they use it
Mhm.
much more broadly than we do. We will adopt children that we're not related to,
Yes.
and they get the full legal status and they get the citizenship as if they are a biological child,
Mhm.
etc. Right? In most
Right.
countries, that's how the law works. The Romans would adopt people the same age. They'd adopt people who were older than themselves.
Mm.
So it was there were many cases of this, and a person there were cases where an older person became the legal son of a younger person, and it was all about acquisition or transferring wealth and power.
Yeah. Right.
You're right, right. So anyway, so yeah, so it wasn't terribly unusual for Julius Caesar to adopt his great nephew in the way that he did. That was probably even more conventional than many of the adoptions the Romans did. But the fourth thing I think he's well remembered for, of course, is getting murdered on the floor of the Senate. So that's quite interesting. He seems to be genuinely surprised by this. He seems to have
Hmm.
not expected this at all. Uh, it was from the records at the time, it didn't kind of go down the way it's often portrayed as going down. Apparently, most of the senators, so a certain number of senators, I don't know, a dozen or 20 or something, brought daggers in to kill him. A lot of the senators kind of actually stood back and didn't sort of want to commit themselves too much to it. And there were two or three guys who really went in and murdered him. And and then after two or three had committed themselves, a bunch of other guys came in and sort of, stabbed him with the dagger. In half the cases, he was already dead by the time
Yeah.
that had happened. And there seemed to have been one or two who walked over after he was lying on the floor and stuck the dagger in, so they had a bloody dagger and could claim to
Hmm.
be part of the whole thing. But in actual fact, they'd really
Right.
been
Yeah.
sitting on the fence and to find out how it went down. So anyway, poor old Julius Caesar killed his great nephew Augustus. Became arguably the first emperor, and then of course set the same site
Yeah.
for the Roman Empire. But uh, I want to get on to a little bit more about the well, actually, I want to make a comment about the empire first. I believe the empire fell in 1453. So there's a real debate about when the Roman Empire fell. Some people, I think, said 476, which was the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the most common date. Some people have even put earlier dates. Some people say, but no, wait, that's the Eastern Roman Empire, or it's the Byzantine Empire.
Right.
It's a continuation of the same state. The term Byzantine Empire, I know I've mentioned this previously, the term Byzantine Empire didn't come up until a couple of centuries later. I hold that the empire fell in 1453
Hmm.
and that, I guess you could say, spiritually and culturally, in many ways, the Roman Empire continues because Western culture inherited quite a lot from the Roman Empire and as a result of the age of exploration and colonialism and so forth, has spread that around the world. So in many ways, aspects of Roman culture are now essentially everywhere.
Yeah. So
So
what constitutes a empire falling in this context then? That
good question. So in 1453, and even there was a brief period, I think, when the territory was occupied, and they expelled the occupiers. So there's even some people even argue it's a little bit earlier. In 1453, the empire, I forgot the emperor, I should say,
Mm.
I can't recall his name. He apparently cast off his imperial robes, drew a sword, and charged into battle.
Hmm.
So he was cut down in battle, and that was it was essentially the fall of the city of Byzantium. Byzantium, of course, then became known as Constantinople and
Yep.
now Istanbul.
Yes.
So that's what really constituted final fall of the Roman Empire. However, having said that, right, so this is where, it does become debatable when the Roman Empire fell, right?
Yeah.
Um, Apparently, some groups, and there's a story about this, the story probably didn't literally happen, but it does give an indication of how some people felt about Roman knowledge, Romanness, right?
Hmm.
There's a story that in 1912 Greek soldiers occupied a Greek-speaking island that I think had been part of the would have been part of the Ottoman Empire actually, and the children in the village, one of the villagers, ran out to see these Greek soldiers that had landed. Now
Hmm.
they were Greek-speaking, right?
Yeah.
And the soldier said something like, "They said, oh, we've come out to see the Greek soldiers," and this soldier said something like, "Aren't you Greek?" And one of the children is supposed to have said, "We're Romans." So
Right. Yeah.
this gives you some indication of sort of how Romanness even though the story probably didn't literally happen. It gives you some indication there were
Yeah.
people even quite recently who kind of thought of themselves as Romans. So this idea of Roman is, of course, there are lots of countries and empires who thought of themselves as a successor of Rome.
Hmm.
You know, so you can find all sorts of information online that all sorts of countries have done this, including Russia. So this idea, people wanted to be associated with Rome, and yes, so it is. There is a real question about when an empire fell, but I like to. I think the fall of Constantinople and the emperor dying in battle, I like to think is the probably the end of the line for the
Hmm.
Roman Empire in 1453. But
Yep.
it continued on in terms of in terms of the legal system, the customs. Uh, Birthday cakes are Roman, by the way.
Oh,
So yes, so that was something the Romans did, and that we inherited. One of it's like that one's probably not an important one, but it's an interesting one to show how common birthday cakes have become. And this is something we got from the Romans. So and of course the rule of law and having the sort of having quite an important a legal structure to which is something that was relatively unusual at the time and has
mhm.
been inherited by many countries. So
Right.
and is now considered to be normal.
Hmm. Makes
So,
sense.
quite a lot I've got on there, but I want to get to actual Julius Caesar and a couple of points that I think make him a great man of history.
Sure.
So, he was actually one of the problems in Rome that had been going on for several centuries, and the Marian reforms that I mentioned earlier kind of tried to fix this, but the problems had persisted. Uh, only Roman citizens could be in the legions, the primary military force. There could be auxiliary soldiers, who then obviously were the foreigners who wanted Roman citizenship, but the legions themselves had required someone to be a Roman citizen up until the Marian reforms, as I understand it.
Yeah.
And the problem, oh, you had to be landowning. That's right. You had to be a landowning Roman citizen. That's right. That was
Hmm.
the trick.
Okay. Yeah.
And what would happen is landowning Roman citizens would go off into the army, maybe out of an obligation, but to get wealthy, but maybe out of obligation to the state, maybe because they saw a value in it in terms of if they can get back wealthy. But little by little, there was a problem where because the sort of the man of the house, a lot of these farms were essentially family-owned farms. The man of the
Yes.
house would leave, the wife and the kids would be left to farm the land. There were
Hmm.
many cases where they would fall behind. They often had debts, and little by little, land was getting eaten up by wealthy landowners who would extend debts to these family farmers. Because the man was away in the army, they would fall behind. The land would be repossessed. So before he came back, the land would be
Hmm.
actually lose the land
Yeah.
which technically made him ineligible in the army, actually.
Oh.
So, yeah, so this caused two problems. One, over many centuries, more and more land was falling into the hands of wealthy landowners, and secondly, the pool of men who could actually serve in the army was falling, and that's what, as I understand it, the Marian reforms are about to open up the army to a greater number of men and stop this problem. But by the time that Julius Caesar was powerful, is a few decades after the Marian reforms. This was still a big problem. There was still a lot of disenfranchised Roman citizens. These are Roman citizens, and
Mhm.
they're at the head of a powerful republic, and they don't own any land, and they're impoverished, right? And they had what they called the grain dole, which was a system of paying, giving out grain for bread to poor Romans and so forth. But a lot of Romans wanted land, and there was a faction in society in Roman politics to essentially redistribute land and give back land give land back to the poor. I think there were a few different proposals. One was to buy land and to redistribute it to the poor and so forth. Anyway, Julius Caesar was a leading figure in this proposal. So I think that it's fantastic that he was attempting to, talking 2,000 years ago, he was attempting to address a serious problem in their society. And I think that's a fabulous thing, given that it's one thing for the state to be wealthy, but there were many impoverished Romans. So I think he was thinking ahead and thinking about the stability of the state in the long term, because there was this problem that had appeared over centuries. But the second one I want to mention, I think, is even cooler, and that's the calendar, because
Mhm.
the Roman calendar was pretty much broken. Uh,
Yeah, but
it
I had
actually, yeah,
problems. Yeah.
exactly. It actually required manual intervention. So Julius Caesar was actually Pontificus Maximus, I think was the term, Pontificus Maximus.
Okay.
And it's actually where the term pontiff comes from, by the way, as a reference
Pontificate.
to the Pope. Yeah. So it was one of the most powerful religious positions in Rome, and it had the responsibility of manually managing the calendar. And there was actually a situation where, because the Pontificus Maximus, Julius Caesar, was away on campaign at one point, there was one year that was particularly long because he wasn't back in Rome to fix the year, and the year just ticked on, and it didn't
Huh?
become the next year because he was not there to manually make the changes that were
Oh,
necessary.
really? That's pretty
Yes,
interesting.
exactly.
Yeah.
So this is very broken, exactly.
Uh-huh.
So he got the idea of fixing the calendar and automating it based on a series of simple rules, right? That
Hmm.
anybody could then process the calendar. You wouldn't
Yeah.
have to have a guy standing there to make the
Hmm.
changes.
Yeah.
And that's how we ended up with the Julian calendar. So he introduced
Yes.
the obviously he didn't draw it was academics that drew it up, but he sponsored the Julian calendar and got it. I think when he was consul, and got it introduced. The Julian calendar itself was also a bit broken, but it was a lot better than the Roman calendar. So the Julian calendar had every fourth year as a leap year,
Hmm.
which might sound familiar. And I hear people saying, hang on, isn't every fourth year a leap year now? And the answer to that question is no, it isn't actually. There are a few leap years that aren't. There are a few fourth years that are not, in fact, leap years.
Mm.
So later on, Pope Gregory came along and introduced the Gregorian calendar, which is the one we use, and
Yes.
fixed the dates and introduced a calendar that actually skips a few leap years. So, yes, we actually skip leap years periodically.
Yes.
A lot of people don't know that, but yes.
Hmm.
Um, anyway, so uh, fixing the calendar, fabulous. So I
Hmm.
think, so to me, doing what he did in terms of obviously it was a conquest, but it was an incredible conquest and brought Roman civilization to a large part of Europe, which set the stage for the modern world in many ways. And Yeah, looking at land reform, which I think is something that was necessary. Continue. I don't think he was particularly successful in land reform, but at least he was trying to deal
Right.
with it. And I think it became an ongoing problem for a few more centuries in Rome. But they did it. I think eventually they addressed it. And fixing the calendar. I think
Hmm.
these are really important things. The calendar may not seem really exciting, but I think that the Julian calendar set the stage for the Gregorian calendar we use, and it has made things, much more, it's been a very effective calendar that we've got.
Hmm.
It may not seem like a big thing, as I said, but there are all sorts of calendars around the world that are completely broken even today. So,
Right, for sure.
yeah, yeah, lunar calendars that drift through the year and so forth. So the fact we've got the Gregorian calendar, which is based on the Julian calendar, I think has really helped. But anyway, calendars may not be exciting, but I think they're useful.
Well, as we say, he's been doing a lot. He's done a lot of this sort of thing, which actually constitutes great because it does constitute great man of history because of the sheer long-term impact of this. And any given thing we take for granted, any kind of traditions we follow is usually so we fail to appreciate this constantly. Is that it's usually instigated by some kind of a out of the box thinker. So traditions, it's a bit of an error to say that we've always done it this way. I mean, yeah, obviously over time we would have always done it this way for that period of time, but it didn't come out of nowhere. It didn't start up in a
Hmm.
vacuum. It was a devised thing. Uh,
Exactly.
right.
Somebody had to think of something that's right that didn't exist before. That's
That's
right.
right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you
Um,
follow a tradition or you take something for granted, or you're saying that you have to follow tradition, you should thank a radical of sorts who
there
was
would have been a
responsible
radical
for
at
it.
the beginning at some point. Quite
That's
right.
right.
Yes,
Hmm.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes. So, excuse me.
Hmm.
In fact, on that point, actually, this is something I think I probably mentioned before, but
Hmm.
there are radicals who change things, and then there are other people that come along and follow. And of course,
Hmm.
the followers of one era who follow a particular philosophy that's accepted in their era would have would have been opposed to that, but that same philosophy had they existed in a previous era.
Hmm.
So I think many of the people who oppose men's rights today, for example, um, if we look back, they would have opposed other philosophies that they now follow when they were new, right?
Right.
So and yeah, so there are a group of people who will just oppose any sort of new idea, but those same type of people will later on be the followers of the philosophy that they accept.
Yeah.
So take heart as for example concepts like rejecting gynocentrism become more common in society. You will see more acceptance and you will see more people, those same people, being willing to accept that and accept that as the normal and
Yes.
even defend it. So yes,
Right. Okay. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
So I think take heart. It seems hard at the time, but I think I think we've already made huge progress. But I think in the future we'll see. I think even actually concepts like rejection of gynocentrism are even going mainstream now. So
Hmm.
look another 20, 30 years down the road, and you'll see that we just be accepted as normal, I suspect. I
I
really do
see.
think it's that. I really do think
Yeah.
it's happening that fast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. We're seeing a lot of the demand to make things more fair and more the transactions more honest and equitable.
I do think
That's
so.
that's the thing.
Yes.
Things like gold pill look promising for sure.
Yes.
And
Agreed.
right. Mhm.
Did you
Yeah,
want
so
to briefly explain gold pill?
all
Or
right. So, although I'm not the greatest qualified to speak on the entirety of it, when we talk about the gold pill, we reference the dowry as sort of like a falling back point to show that we have not done the gynocentric song and dance throughout our evolutionary history, as some want to claim. But
Mm.
the dowry system in which the wife or the wife's family actually brings something of material or monetary benefit to kind of actually get that new family started is often cited as a kind of indicator that both sides contributed. So
Yes.
the gold pill discussion right now, I think some people kind of would favor a return to a dowry system at some point, but others kind of use that as an example to maybe have a starting point to think about what how can we make the make it fair now. Women aren't the table; they have to bring something to their table.
And I think that's the
Is
key,
the
isn't
big
it?
mhm.
Both sides are bringing something.
That's right. Yeah. So
Yeah,
so that's what it
exactly.
is. Yes.
So that's the gold pill originated outside of Voice for Men, but we have fully embraced it. I mean,
Hmm.
it's really a new term for something we've been talking about for a very long time.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
So
right.
I've got a
Yeah.
few other topics to talk about.
Mhm.
Did you? I think you did have a few things you'd thought about.
I've got some things I thought about. I could save them towards the end, depending on how long
Okay.
this goes. If you wanted to stick to the subject of conflict, I think I know where you can go to next, I think.
Indeed,
Yeah.
exactly. So I wanted to just mention war. Well, there's a cheery subject. So
Hmm.
there's a couple of wars that are very high profile at the moment. The war in the Middle East, the Ukraine-Russia war, and so forth. They get a lot of press, and I'm not commenting at all on either of those wars in this
Of
particular
course. Yeah.
situation because people hold all sorts of opinions, all sorts of strong opinions, and they're always entitled to those opinions. What I
Yeah.
want to do is talk about other wars, the
Hmm.
forgotten wars, because there are quite a number of wars going on at the moment, and I've got a few on my list here, and I actually haven't even researched all of them to the point where I'm even comfortable mentioning much about them, but I do want to talk about a couple of them. So, Sudan. Sudan has been a bit of a miserable case for a very long time. South Sudan, the country of South Sudan, fought a long war for independence, which they eventually achieved. I think that was about 10, 15 years ago. I didn't check specifically, but I actually kind of had high hopes about it for South Sudan, actually. I mean, they're a new country, and I was really kind of hopeful that they could really be kind of almost a beacon for Africa, show how it's done, kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, but I'll get on to another country in a minute. But unfortunately, South Sudan has got a lot of problems. There's tribal warfare and tribal conflict going on within South Sudan. So I think, I hate to say it, sorry, South Sudan, but so far I think the country's kind of failed post-independence. They really, it could have shown the rest of Africa how to do it. And I'm sorry, it's really in a bad state. I mean, maybe things have picked up recently, but I don't think so. Anyway, so sorry to all the South Sudanese out there. I was hoping for sort of a stable country that, I mean, after all the blood and tears and loss of life to fight for independence, surely you'd want to build a stable, country where your children can grow up in peace. But the country is it continues to be a misery. Anyway, that's actually not even the main thing I want to talk about. Sudan itself, the country that South Sudan broke away from, Sudan is also now got another civil war going on. So yeah, this one started in April 2023.
Yep.
I'm not even going to comment much on the different sides. There's just one I think is government forces and there's a paramilitary force trying to overthrow the government. Essentially, just a some sort of power struggle or between a couple of generals or something like that. Yeah, what can I say? More misery, more death, humanitarian crisis, famine. But what I wanted to say is it's getting very little airtime. This Sydney Civil War, or what's going on in South Sudan, very little airtime. I think Westerners could probably even think a little bit more about these things to pay a little bit more attention to what's going on there.
Right.
Um, got a few others I want to mention as well. Ethiopia. So a lot of people may not be aware of this, but there's a very real possibility that Egypt and Ethiopia are going to go to war.
Hmm.
So what's happened is that Ethiopia is damming the Nile River. Now I checked a few days ago, and it was still the case. So I would be happy to hear, oh no, they've sorted that out, but I don't think that would be the case. So as I said, it was the last time I looked a few days ago. Ethiopia was threatening to dam the Nile River. The Egypt and Sudan actually as well depend on the Nile for water. If the Nile dried up or it was significantly reduced in its volume, Egyptians could simply not have enough water to drink, and the infrastructure required to ship a large amount of water from another country is extraordinary. It would take years to build. It would be a crisis of unprecedented proportions. And the Egyptians have made it pretty clear that if the Ethiopians try that, they're prepared to go to war over it.
Yep.
And the Ethiopians, the last I heard, haven't backed down. So it remains to be seen what will happen there. At a guess, I would say probably Ethiopia will eventually come to they'll come to some accommodation which will involve Ethiopia not cutting off most of the water supply because Egypt will have their backs to the wall. They have no choice but to go to war, essentially. They wouldn't have enough
Mhm.
water.
Yes.
Yeah. So, interestingly enough, Egypt has next to it Israel, which was itself a water short country for a long time, but now actually produces more water than it can use as a result of desalination. And they are actually exporting a little bit of water to Jordan, but I don't think they export any. They export gas to Egypt, but I don't think they export water to Egypt. And even if they could, it would take probably years, like I said, to build the infrastructure to do that. So maybe that's something they want to think about. They probably are thinking about because, as I said, as a result of desalination, it's quite interesting. Israel's a water short country naturally, but their desalination technology is so advanced they now have more water than they need. So
Yeah.
anyway, they probably will export water to Egypt, but yeah, they'll be years away. So it doesn't stop this conflict. So other countries with wars going on or conflicts going on at the moment, Nigeria, Mozambique, both in Africa, Yemen. Yemen's an interesting one. Yemen has been for a long time. There was a lot of people don't know there was a kind of Cold War in the Middle East between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And like all Cold Wars, the countries weren't engaging in direct conflict. They were making sure that conflict happened in other countries where they were backing it. And Yemen was one of those. There were two different groups in Yemen, one backed by Iran, one backed by Saudi Arabia, and killing each other while the two sides pumped money and weapons in. So and Myanmar as well, also known as Burma.
Burma. Yeah.
So yeah, so whether you call it Myanmar or Burma says something about your politics. I'm not quite sure what it says about your politics, but
Yeah.
as I said, my policy is if I encounter someone from there, I use whichever term they used. But I think they probably recognize that foreigners don't understand the subtlety of the politics, I would gather.
Sure. Right.
But if I understand correctly, Burma implies old money aristocracy, and Myanmar implies revolutionary government or something along those
Yeah,
lines.
Myanmar is the newer one, right?
It is exactly,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
So I think, and when I've met people who called it Burma, who Burmese who called it Burma,
Burmese, yeah.
they seem to be old money. So and I gather that's the case. That is old money Burma, Myanmar, revolutionary government. But
Mm,
by all means, call me out if I'm wrong on that. But that's my understanding.
right.
Anyway, all these conflicts are going on. Very little is being talked about. I just want to remind everybody that there's all sorts of things going on in the world, horrible things going on. It's a cheery thought, I know. And remember, it's primarily men dying in these wars. That's often forgotten or talked down by the Western media.
Exactly.
Uh, yeah, whether
Right.
you're talking Russia, Ukraine, or you're talking the Middle East, or you're talking any of these wars,
Hmm.
the predominant people doing the dying are men. It's not women who are the primary victims of war, as Hillary Clinton says.
Right.
And for those who don't know, we have a wiki for men. That quote often gets mentioned. I encourage people to cite quotes and show where they're from. On Wiki for Men, you can find the origin of that quote and under the Hillary Clinton article. And she actually said it again. That original quote, I think, goes back to the early 90s or even late 80s or something. She said it again, and I think in 2023, something very, very similar. So just anyway, I encourage people to source your quotes, cite your quotes. I saw that one again recently, uncited, and I dropped a comment in explaining where it's from. Please cite your quotes on our side of the fence. We can do better than the other side. Please, if you have a quote, try to make some effort to verify, that it's legitimate. We've gone through very carefully all the ones on Wiki for Men we've audited, so hopefully they're all legitimate. If you find any that aren't, by all means raise it with us.
Right.
But yeah, but anyway, so that's something that Hillary Clinton really said. We know where and when she said it, and again she said it again. I think in or something very similar to it in 2023. So it's a position she still holds. But the primary victims of war are over and above overwhelmingly men. All these wars result in lots of dead young men.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah.
Right. This is especially true in the United States, but if the country is not directly involved, not too directly involved, at least, I don't know how much it really isn't. And I'm a definitely a non-interventionist kind of guy. So I don't. It's not like I want America, like say my country involved in wars, but um. If it hasn't some kind of relation to direct relation to it, then I feel like it doesn't get the airtime. And by
Mm,
airtime, I don't mean the glamorization. I mean just the attention.
mm.
The
Yes,
awareness of this kind of war. I think it requires some kind of a grotesque romanticization for anyone to actually pay attention right now. Because, and
mm,
all things considered, we in Western countries, especially in the United States, feel pretty uh, secure for the most part. I
mhm.
know
Yes,
this is somewhat relative depending on where we are, but it's almost like we don't really feel like we're in war, even though there are wars all the time. We
mm,
say we're for peace, but we don't know a whole lot of details about the wars we're not involved in.
mm.
And so I think war is a bit too terrible to not give it more thought than that, and more serious thought.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And I think you're right. As a Westerner, it can be, or anyone in an advanced economy which is not directly threatened, can seem a bit abstract, where yes, these wars are going on and people are suffering,
Hmm.
but that's in some other place.
Hmm.
We're okay, and I get up for work and I'm safe, and I can reasonably expect that I will not come under threat and so forth. So, yes, and that's partly because of how much wealth we have, and partly because Western countries. I mean, it's no real coincidence. If you look at the places where the wealthy countries are, it's kind of not surprising they're where they are.
Hmm.
I mean, Thomas Sowell makes a really good argument about the United States and how many navigable rivers the United States has and how useful that is in terms of moving goods around and so forth.
Yes.
I think he said more navigable rivers than the rest of the world combined, and you
Yeah.
compare that to Africa, which, for example, in other words, good harbors too. Wealthy countries tend to have good harbors, right? Australia has a number of many good harbors. The United States has many good harbors. Africa, I think it was Thomas Sowell again who said he doesn't have a single really good harbor.
Right.
So in the entire continent. So something as simple as a really good harbour or a defensible harbour in the 19th century,
Mhm.
when a lot of these cities were being built, where you could you could protect your ships. I'm thinking about Australia now.
Mhm.
Sydney Harbour
Yeah.
is famous. It's considered to be one of the world's best harbours, right? And I think it was Arthur Phillip who founded the colony of Australia, the colony of New South Wales, became
Yeah.
Australia,
Right.
and he said. It's basically, I think he said that you could basically put the entire Royal Navy in Sydney Harbour and keep it
Mhm.
safe if you wanted to do that, is what it
Right.
amounted to. I think he said 1,000 ships of the line or something like that.
Hmm.
So, and Australia has, and you can see it in Australian cities in particular because they were built in the 19th century. Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne are all very obviously built on defensible harbours where you could put guns on the entranceways and protect the cities from attacks by ships and so forth. And then this is true in a lot of other countries too. But as I said, so you see these sort of things and the vast resources too. The vast resources available in the United States, in Australia, Canada, and other countries. Many wealthy countries. It's not terribly surprising when you really look at it that they've landed on our feet the way that we have in many of these countries with the vast
Right.
resources available, the great rivers, etc. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Well, I
just
mean,
that's a bit of an aside, but
no, I mean, it's not too much of an aside because peace and trade, flourishing trade, tend to go together in my mind.
they do, they
Uh,
do.
Right, and yeah, like you say, like Africa, when it comes to that sort of setup, is absolute, garbage. This is not me trying to be harsh to the country
No.
itself. It's just the problem is you got to accept some realities about the nature of Africa, and we need some kind of a grand innovation to flourish, make the trade flourish in order to kind
Mm,
of re restore peace in those areas. I mean, it seems like famine is a big uh, denominator when it comes to these sort of civil wars, like you've said. I know it factors in. So if you get people in that trade mindset, put down, don't swing your axe, and and try and embrace, I may hate your guts, but let's do a trade and kind of stave off
mm.
the, whatever.
Yes, that's right.
Then
You don't
yeah,
have. I was just saying you don't have to love someone to trade with them. That's right. You just have to be committed to not fighting them. Exactly.
right, right.
Yeah. Sorry, did interrupt. Go on.
No, 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 it's okay. Yeah, and so it seems like peace requires a lot of bravery.
Mm,
To kind of the bravery to interact with someone. I mean, a lot who advocate for wars kind of use bravery as sort of like a talking point to serve and die for your country and so forth. And I'm not putting down those who have, perished
mm,
in the defense of their countries. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just making a point that uh, you know, cooperation, and I don't mean the social justice warrior version of coexistence, but I mean like trade coexistence and like the maintaining of peace is quite a brave thing to do. Yeah.
mm. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I actually think of the Egypt-Israel peace treaty quite a bit.
Hmm.
They call it the Cold Peace. The two countries, I mean, there's a fair bit of there's more enmity in Egypt for Israel than the other way around. But neither country, the citizens of neither country, particularly love the other, right? But the two countries are both committed to peace because they
Hmm.
recognize that a war between the two countries, Egypt and Israel, would be highly destructive to both countries and an
Hmm.
extremely foolish thing to do with modern weapons. So obviously they had wars in the past, but they're both much more powerful now. So just even at one point, the Islamic Brotherhood took over Egypt, and there was a real worry. And one of the first things they said when they announced that there was a real worry that because they've been hostile to Israel in the past, there was a real worry that they may tear up the peace treaty. And one of the first things that the Islamic Brotherhood said was that they would honor all existing treaties. And that was a way of confirming the treaty with Israel would remain in place without having to mention Israel, you see. Just that
Right. Yeah.
all treaties were, yeah.
Mhm.
So the peace holds. Peace holds through political, regardless of who's in charge in Israel or Egypt, through from 1977 when it was signed through to the disengagement in 1982, and now it's held. Despite all the other problems going on, because both countries realize they're far worse off if they end up fighting. And trust has built up between them, and trade has slowly built up.
Yeah.
Trade was non it was virtually non-existent for a long time, but it has, as I said, Israel actually exports natural gas to Egypt now. So there is a little bit of trade. It's been slow to come, but it has finally come. And then trust has. It's actually uh, I don't know if you know, but under the treaty, neither side is allowed. Both countries are restricted in the amount of military force they can have close to the border. Of course, Israel is a much smaller country, so the area that they're restricted is quite small. But in Egypt, it's quite large. It's actually the entire Sinai desert, and several times, in order to fight various insurgent groups, Egypt has requested permission to increase the amount of military forces they're allowed in the Sinai under the treaty,
Mhm.
and every single time Israel has agreed, which is a sign that they do trust Egypt to use the forces to attack insurgents, not to turn them on them. And there was actually an incident a few years ago where Israel actually fired missiles across the border into Egypt, and a lot of people were shocked by that, and they attacked insurgents in the Sinai. And they've never come out and said it, but there's no way in the world I believe that would have happened without the approval of the Egyptian government. In fact, it's very likely the Egyptians asked them to do it because the Israelis obviously have more advanced weapons. So I suspect that Egypt has actually asked them to use some of those advanced weapons to attack essentially insurgent groups.
I see.
I don't, to my knowledge, they never admitted it publicly, but I'm quite certain that was something the two countries agreed. So anyway, yeah, there's actually quite a lot of trust between them, and that's come about as a result of decades of peace. So it's been slow, it's been gradual, but it's there now. So there is quite a bit of trust between them, which is great to see. So
Yes.
yeah.
Mhm.
But yes, I think that hopefully we can minimize or eliminate wars in the future. I know it's a hard ask, but I think it's doable
Right.
eventually.
And
So
yeah, sure. Some final thoughts on this one. So,
hmm,
so this will require a lot of spreading of kind of like how the Roman ideas spread even after its downfall, as it were.
yeah,
I think, and I'm not saying that America will. I don't want America to have this down. I don't want America to have this downfall or anything like that. I'm not saying
no,
that, but that idea should spread more global,
yeah.
and that spirit of trade and
And resolve your differences peacefully. That's right.
exactly right.
Yeah. Isn't
So
it better to
so
have a negotiation and
mhm,
come to some solution that even if
right.
everyone walks away? They always joke about. I think the saying is the definition of a negotiation is that both sides walk away a little bit unhappy or something along those lines, where
Right.
both
Yeah.
sides had to give something up.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, but so we speak of the immigrant crisis of various countries and so forth, especially in places like the UK. And
Mm.
the sentiment to defend your country from that sort of thing is correct, but I think it's only part of the picture. If we kind of so if they're entering, you know, those countries. I think this almost gives that country a say in what happens towards the countries giving them those
Mhm.
people.
That's
I mean,
interesting.
this is
Yeah.
more of a thought experiment, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so if we kind of get more conscious about this kind of thing, we could think about peace, how to administer. Well, uh, administer is a bit of a tricky word to use here. But kind of like think of an innovative sort of solution, and we're thinking along the lines of things like trade here. But I don't know the particulars. I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head here,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
brainstorming. But if we get more involved in that, maybe we can expedite their return to wherever countries they came from.
The current
So,
system certainly has some problems. Like some countries refuse to accept returnees as well. I saw an example of this just recently. I'm just trying to think what country it was, but they were simply refusing to accept their own citizens back. Yeah.
Yeah.
And under the current rules, a country can't remove them unless another countries, their country of origin is willing to accept them back in
Hmm.
general.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All
So
right.
yes,
So,
current system definitely needs reform.
yeah, sure, yeah. So, short of direct interventionalism, I think we need to kind of keep our brain gears turning on this one because we need to. Uh, the solution is not just as simple as you know deport because that's just taking care of the attack as it happens. We kind of need to kind of go at its source somewhat and mitigate that.
Yes, I
So
agree. I've long said
I
I think the best thing would be if people didn't want to leave their own countries. In actual fact, research has shown that most immigrants would actually, most refugees would actually rather not leave. Obviously, there are economic refugees who try to slip in and so forth, but a lot of genuine refugees would actually rather stay at home. It's just that the situation. So if we can, yeah, if we can work towards a situation where their own countries are more
Mhm.
desirable, and
Yeah.
even if they're not as wealthy, as long as they're peaceful, then you would see less people wanting to leave. I know it's much
Hmm.
easier said than done though. That's the point.
Right. Sure.
Yeah,
All right. Okay.
that is a hard one, possibly the
Yes.
hardest problem of our
Oh yeah.
age.
I don't claim to have the solution to all this kind of thing. I'm just
No,
speaking broadly here. So
yeah, and this, as I said, this is something I've thought about too in terms of, yeah, I think the solution to the refugee crisis is to have a situation where the people don't would rather not leave because as I said, most of them would prefer to stay in their own
mhm.
country.
Yep.
Very easy to say, but not very easy to implement.
Mhm.
Um, but I do think I'm not necessarily naturally an optimist, but I do think we'll get there in the end. It may take some time. There's a general trend towards society generally being more safer, and and more prosperous too. This may not people today may be shocked to learn this, but uh, obviously we're much more. Even poor people today are far more prosperous than poor people of a few centuries ago.
That much true.
Um,
Yep. Yep.
Exactly. In fact, pretty much everybody lived in poverty. If you look at, say, even Western countries, by our standards, pretty much the entire population lived in poverty a couple of hundred years ago.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yep.
But so I do think that given sufficient time, the situation will improve. It's
Hmm.
not to say that some time won't have problems of their own, but I do think we'll eventually get there. But it may take us rather a long time, unfortunately.
Right. Yes.
So Hannah Wallen left a comment.
On our last
And I was
video. Yeah.
thinking in the last video, exactly, I was thinking it's quite long. Thank you, Hannah, very much. And I was thinking about writing something, and then I thought, well, why don't we respond in
Yeah.
the video? Do you think you could pop it up on the screen? Would that be an option?
It will be done in post, but
Yes,
let me
exactly.
yeah, but do you have it? Well, I'll read it out loud.
I
So
do have it
so
up. Thank you. I do have it
okay,
up, but
cool.
yeah, thank you. Through the magic of television, you'll see it appear
Yes,
when you're
right,
watching the
right.
video. That's
The
right.
magic of cheap editing.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So one job that I think is going to outlast a lot of other jobs is what I do. And so she's talking about she's responding to our AI discussion from last time,
Yes, that's right.
and Luddite fallacy. All right, so to continue her comment, I'm a direct support professional for intellectually disabled adults. Even though most of what I do is fairly unsophisticated, housekeeping, cooking, transportation, there are aspects of it, direct caregiving, acting in advisory capacity, observing and assisting with managerial assessment of our charges, conditions, behaviors, interests, and needs, that would require a lot of sophistication from any kind of bot that might be used to replace a DSP. Even then, there are things that a human will do, dragging a resisting person out of a burning building rather than arguing with them as to why the emergency merits leaving all their stuff and evacuating the building, that are difficult to replace with anything non-human.
Yes.
Another thing I've noticed is, did you want to comment on a paragraph as it goes, or
No, I think maybe read the entire thing. Does that sound good?
that's fine. Sure. Another thing I've noticed is that the more cheap and disposable mass-produced stuff becomes, the more certain subgroups of people value goods that are handcrafted and unusual. And I doubt the human element in that is going to be replaced by the non-human elements anytime soon, because a part of what makes it valuable is the human involvement in the creative process and the labor. Unless people stop valuing that, Such jobs will still exist. I think that will apply not just to crafts, but also to arts. Historically, people have feared new technologies and then found that rather than vanishing, jobs evolve from doing the things new tech replaced to using or managing said new tech. Do you see this potentially occurring in many areas of AI function as well? Also, is there a way to outfit AI with a set of parameters that would provide an ethical framework for its behavior and ensure that it stays within said parameters?
I'm so glad you asked, Hannah. So, are you happy if I jump in and
Go right
make a
ahead.
few
Yeah.
comments there? All right,
Yeah,
wonderful.
you can
Thank you.
start
And
off.
then
Yeah.
thank you. So, okay, the first one, in terms of replacing humans, yes, I think that AI, and this will, I probably touched on, maybe may have touched on some of this a little bit in the last video, but uh, AI has become very topical in the last few, maybe 2 or 3 years in particular, right? Particularly since the launch of ChatGPT, and it can appear that AI has suddenly appeared on the scene, but that's actually not the case. What we're seeing today is the end result of 50 to 60 years worth of work. And it's been quite slow and a lot slower than I think a lot of people realize. So yes, it's going to be very hard for AI. This isn't something that's going to happen over the next couple of years, I think. Some people sort of almost apply Moore's law to it and think, well, you've got a smart AI today, and in 18 months' time, they'll be twice as smart. And 18 months after that, they'll be twice as smart. For those who don't know, Moore's law is a phenomenon that has occurred in IT in terms of which shows the exponential growth of computer technology. It's mostly finished now, by the way. Moore's law is pretty much done. But uh, yeah, I think that in actual fact, if you look at AI, the whole thing has been much slower and much more painful. And I'm not in any way disparaging. There's been some fabulous work, and it's absolutely amazing what they have achieved. But it has been a long, very long road, right? And I don't think we'll see uh, AI replacing humans in a wide variety of roles, as some people are suggesting, anytime soon. As I said, I've said the Luddite fallacy says it'll cause mass unemployment. It won't. But even aside from that, I think the process of replacing humans, even in existing jobs, will be much slower and much more painful than a lot of people currently think it will be, because these are quite frankly hard problems. Okay, so. In terms of yeah, creative process. So this is a really, I'm glad you mentioned this, Hannah. So there's definitely a pushback against AI content, against AI pictures, and against AI comments in say Quora. If you look on Quora, you'll see somebody will leave an AI comment, and you'll just see, oh, AI comment, and it gets dismissed. AI art. There's absolutely a growing group. There've always been people who've obviously who've valued that human involvement, but I think it's actually in response to AI is actually growing a lot. And in particular, and this is something that's only occurred to me really since we last spoke, I think it's young people actually who are doing it. I think older people are actually kind of more willing to give the AI a chance and use it. A lot of the young people are actually kind of pretty hostile to it. They're the ones who are dismissing AI comments and dismissing AI pictures and valuing human creativity. I mean, there's a philosophical question about is AI if is a picture produced by AI art? It's art insofar as it's a picture, but it's not art insofar as art is meant to convey meaning. So I've heard some people say, well, I may get meaning out of it. Well, that's true, but the AI didn't have an intent the way that a human or a human creator would have had. So yes, I think that in actual fact, there's a huge burgeoning movement of particularly young people who are rejecting AI in certain areas. Now, that doesn't mean they won't use it, I don't know, to help them navigate or something like that, if it's
Yeah.
part of the navigation application or whatever. But in terms
Mhm.
of creative works and so forth, I think that there's actually more emphasis among young people today to focus on that creative aspect. Absolutely. And in terms of yeah, so in terms of jobs, yeah, so I think uh, that AI will create new jobs. 100%. I think that's in fact, not only will it create new jobs, it'll create new classes of jobs, as previous technologies have. So And the one I love bringing up, because I think this is just a classic example, okay, is search engine optimization, right? There are people whose job it is to optimize search engine results. That's what they do, right? Now that job was meaningless before the invention of search engines, right? Which was meaningless before the invention of the web, right? So the web brought forth search engines, which spawned an entirely new job that was simply not envisioned. And I can't think, I mean, science fiction has been really good in terms of predicting some technologies, but I can't think of a single work in science fiction who came up with any, science fiction also came up with anything like search engine optimization as a job, right?
Right.
So I think that AI, yes, so the Laddite fallacy doesn't say that people won't lose their jobs, right? It just
Right.
says that there won't be mass unemployment.
Right.
Some people will lose their jobs as a result of innovation of technology, including AI. That has already
Right.
happened.
Hmm.
But there will not only be there'll be new jobs and new classes of jobs to do. So there won't be mass unemployment, but people will be doing different jobs. And yes, AI will absolutely bring forth some sort of classes of jobs that we can't even envision right now. And in 20 years' time, we might be saying, "Yep, that's an example right there," but we just won't even know what it is right now.
Gotcha. Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
I have an answer about the ethical question.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yes, you're right.
sorry,
So
so I have one too, but I'll leave you. I'll wait till you've said yours.
that's fine. So, um, the thing about AI is that, well, it's really just like a hyper optimized kind of a tool, and it is
Mm.
only as good, the ethics of it is only as good as our ethics, and implementing it is only as good as our ability to implement these ethics.
Yes.
And also, if ethics is supposed to be the science of navigating morality, then our morality has to actually be very clear regarding this. And I think the morality in my mind is what is best for the sovereign individual in terms of his rights being respected and so forth. This step towards peace in my mind and the well-being in that peaceful context. So AI has to be optimized towards that and not so neutral to it. So it's really reliant on the ethics of the developer and the
Mhm.
comp and his competence as well.
And the
There's a bit
and
of
the
a
training
loop.
set.
Yeah, there's a bit of a loop here because if we rely on AI to handle that as part of the fear in the coding environment, then it kind of self unoptimizes it. It kind of gets left in a chaos of being a basic ethical and coding mess. So this is why human involvement in that is ethically important. It's like the humans are the
Mm.
ethical department.
Mm.
So it has to so the AI's expression of that has to be a direct reflection of the ethical programmer. So this, I've spoken about Uncle Bob Martin before, Robert C. Martin, and he's very much about coding ethics and so forth. He speaks more broadly of it, and I don't know everything that he says, but he seems to propose a sort of equivalent of a Hippocratic oath for the developer, like a do no harm sort of a thing. Uh, I debate some of the particulars of what he said, but I'm not really here to talk about that right now. But I think but what I want to talk about is that I think this idea of ethical professionalism should be taken more seriously than it is. I think too many developers, software developers, are kind of on the software. It evolved from software is infallible to software is just it's no big deal if you don't get it right kind of thing. This kind of a very casual idea about it, which is not good. So
100%.
exactly,
Yes.
yeah, I'm not saying kill work life balance or anything like that. It's a bit of a different subject, but you still maintain competence and professionalism, and that's going to be the ethical framework for that. So more, I do need to go a little bit more on this one because the AI has to serve never as a replacement for human action. because our goal is ultimately human action. Um, like there's talk about automated cars, right? And this is coming more to the forefront. What with people, with groups like Tesla, being kind of like the forerunner of this sort of thing. It appears to be, but it has to be in not relinquishing control to the vehicle, but make that automation be a part of your control. That's
Mm,
that's what the mindset should be,
yes,
and that
agreed.
way you could be so. This will require split second override to make it automatic if something were to go wrong, you know, and so automated control by a different entity should be ethically unthinkable. So I will make a necessary tangent here. So for the second time, I watched the Naked Gun movie.
Mhm.
So it's one of, I am satisfied with it. It is what comedy should be today. Like, in a mess of unfunny garbage, it should be today. But the antagonist is sort of a non-political pastiche of in my mind, Elon Musk. It's not a political comment. It's just he is the CEO of a company that does electric cars that automate driving. Um, so and there's a murder mystery that is ultimately involved to be due to an automated car, murder by automated car, right? So this is kind of an interesting segue. Well, I wasn't going to talk too much about it, just that it was a good movie, but this is an interesting way to segue into that subject. Is so that situation where the bad guy the powers that be would take over a car and murder someone, or even have that sort of situation accidentally happen, should not be. Like this I and in the movie Frank Drebin Jr. Comically is always like running into like a bunch of people while he's like having his coffee and reading his newspaper in the car and stuff. It's pretty funny. But in a real life situation, you sh the driver, the user of the AI should have almost the same awareness as the developer as to what the point of this all is, what the ethical use of this technology is. So that's a bit of a ramble on my part. What did you want to add something to that or?
Oh, well, you actually make really good points there, actually. No, I just wanted to add, or make a few comments about the ethical aspect, which, yes, thank you. I had missed them during my first run through, and I did have a mental note about a point to that. So, and I want to start by saying I'm not anti-AI at all.
Of
Okay,
course, yeah, of
absolutely not. I
course.
think that AI is a
Yeah,
very effective tool in many ways, and
yeah.
I know there are some plans for I have some plans for it at Voice from N, for example. But it is
Mhm.
a tool, and I do think that people
Yes.
are getting the wrong, perhaps particularly people who don't have the background in IT, are getting the wrong end of the stick about it, and thinking it's something that it is not in some cases. It is a tool, but anyway, um, we have the ethics is absolutely essential because we've already seen some unethical behavior from AIs, and this is because it doesn't appear to have been trained properly in regards to ethics. Okay,
Mhm.
but more generally, I think the people who are pushing AI tend to be very, whether they really believe this, they at least portray themselves being very optimistic about it, in the sense that they tend to see it as providing the best of intelligence, but seem to think it won't also produce the worst of intelligence, right? And I think the two are inexorably linked. And I think I might have mentioned last time about this. So first of all, there's already been a simulated example where an AI tried to blackmail someone. I think I might have mentioned that. But first of all, I thought it might have been a joke when I saw it and I checked it was real. It was a simulated environment, but it did try to blackmail someone. But also, too, I believe that concepts like mental illness are probably inexorably linked to intelligence, and that if you end up with something that simulates human intelligence, I think you're going to end up with simulating things like anxiety and even psychosis and so forth. I think you'll actually end up seeing these in AIs. So. given that that's the case, that steps outside the ethics a little bit, but I guess it's related. We need to be aware of this. We need to recognize that they're not just going to be the best of intelligence, they're also going to carry along the baggage of intelligence as well. And we need to, and that and part of that is the ethics, and we need to be ready with that. So we need to train them ethically and so forth. So, yeah.
Yes, right. Yeah. And a more direct answer to is there a way to outfit AI? Well, it's not a question of is there a way. It's that when are they going to get off their asses and do it? Because
Mm.
it's a direct in my opinion, it's something that we're absolutely capable of doing already. So, it's more like let me count the ways instead of is there a way? So,
Yeah.
yeah, right, right. It's
Uh,
just are they going
And
to
in
have the
actual,
right mindset to program this?
and in actual fact, some of the biases we've seen, it doesn't seem like all of the biases come from the training in the data set. Some of them may come directly from the programming as well. For example,
Mhm.
there are woke biases in some of the
Yeah.
AIs, for example. And if they can do that, then they can implement
Yeah.
ethical limitations, exactly,
Okay.
ethical constraints
Right.
on the AI as well. So,
Yeah, sure.
and this is stuff we need to think of now, not in 5 or 10
Hmm.
years.
Exactly. And I once again have to address the misunderstanding people have about technology and things like computers and something like that. It's a really good thing that you brought up Julius Caesar today as your great man of history because the calendar is a computer, kind of, you know? It's like or at least it's an algorithm of some sort.
Yes, exactly, it's
Yeah, yeah,
algorithmic.
yeah.
That's right.
It's a piece of technology.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, right. And it needed a bug fix, and that needed a bug fix. So,
Yes.
so right, right.
And in actual
Yes.
fact, it's still not perfect, but it's
Hmm.
close enough at the moment. I think it's the year 3000 before we have to
Right.
worry about it again. But
Exactly.
some future civilization may
Right.
patch the Gregorian calendar. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, sure. But all this thing about technology, computers, and now AI is that what it comes down at the end of the day is automation. And automation mustn't replace human action, it should serve to enhance it.
Yes.
So that's the mind. There's a danger to taking things too for granted, like we should kind of have some kind of reverence and appreciation every time we look at the calendar on your phone or when you use your phone or when we do a podcast like this or something like that. I think there's too much use without a spiritual appreciation of it, I think.
Absolutely. Yep.
Hmm.
In fact, if you really look at some of the technology we use, even something I say as simple as electricity, it's not simple at all. It's just
Hmm.
well implemented, right? I think it's absolutely amazing that it works at all the way as well as
Right.
it does.
Hmm.
That we have extraordinarily high uptimes on the electrical grid these days, even higher than when I was a
Yeah.
child, actually.
Right.
But just the fact that AC current can carry it so far and do as well as it does, it's absolutely extraordinary. And I agree. I actually am appreciative of these things and often think about these sort of things. And that's
Hmm.
probably not a common position. I would encourage others to do it.
Hmm.
I get up in the morning and I'm so thankful that I was born in a developed nation which is safe because
Hmm.
there are plenty of places around the world which are not safe. And I've got electricity whenever I want it, and I've got the internet when I want it, and just these amazing technologies
Hmm.
that came
Hmm.
about as a result of the work of people that came before me. And yeah, people that came before me, mostly men that came before me.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. All
So
right. Yeah.
it's turned out to quite reasonably long episode, hasn't it?
Yeah, yeah, reasonably long. I don't think it's quite as long as the other one, unless we make it longer. But it depends on how long you want to go about this one. But I did want to talk about the naked gun and passing, but I was glad I was able to use it as a part of a more important answer. But it was a really
That's
fun it was a really fun movie. Like
oh good.
yeah, yeah. It didn't. I was glad to say that it didn't have anything so outwardly woke. No movie is perfect, but But it was true to the spirit of the Naked Gun movies. I'm a big fan of the series that it was based on, Police Squad, and the movies. And I saw Police Squads first, and I was a fan of it first. So I was when I saw the original Naked Gun movies, they were hysterical. Don't get me wrong, but I was kind of slightly disappointed that it didn't have the it was more over the top than Police Squad was.
Yeah.
But still, I like the the Naked Gun movies. And this was true to the spirit of it. The humor was just what I needed. It's
Excellent.
yeah,
And
right.
you're saying, yeah, they've pulled back on the woke a bit. I imagine there's probably still some in there, but they've pulled back a little
Right,
bit.
yeah, it's nothing so outrageous or too unsubtle about anything. If anything, it's just focused on making a funny story. Yeah,
Good.
so
I'm so glad to hear that because I would love nothing
yeah.
more than for them to
Hmm.
start producing good, decent movies again.
Hmm.
There is a report that Disney is pretty recent report that Disney's pretty unhappy and trying to attract men back and recognizing that they've managed to
Hmm.
alienate men in
Right.
their audience. I do think that a lot of it has pulled back because the bottom line has finally bitten and they're losing enough money that they have to rethink what they're doing. Having said that, I started watching a show just today actually, and it's to me it's got some warning signs that it might be a little bit woke. I'm probably going to give it a little more time, but I'll tell you what it's about. So I've watched Outlander, which is for those who don't know is a TV series based on a series of books, and the premise of the book is that a woman goes back in time. She lives in the 1940s, and she goes back in time to the 18th century, and has to survive. And there's quite a lot that then goes on, and there's a bit about the time travel, but the time travel is kind of secondary. But it's a historical story, and it's got time travel, so it's a bit of a win for me, right? And I don't think that even though like it's a female lead, like, essentially the character's about a woman, and then there's her husband and so forth, but I do think that you can have a story with a female lead without pushing a gynocentric narrative, for example. And I think they've done that in Outlander. I think the story's
Good.
actually really well balanced. The female, it's primarily about her. However, she actually had two different husbands. We'll hope that's not a spoiler. But they're both really interesting characters, and they've got important storylines and so forth. And I think you can have that. You can have a female lead, and indeed, I've watched a number of shows where the characters, the main character is a woman, but it isn't gynocentric, and they're not pushing a woke agenda, right? So, and I think Outlander achieved that. However, there's a new one called Outlander: Blood of My Blood, which is a spin-off. It's actually a prequel, and I watched about 15 minutes, and bit of
Uh,
few red flags already.
uh,
We've noticed this. I've noticed this before, and others have too, where a story will be successful, and then the wokies come in and kind of ruin it at the end. Uh, Not Fatherland, not Fatherland. A story about oh dear, I can't remember the name of the series about about um, an alternative history where uh, where the Nazis won, or essentially, well, the Axis powers won World War II.
okay.
I don't know if you, it's terrible, I can't remember the think of the name right now. But for the first three seasons, it was really good. And the fourth season, it went woke.
Mm.
And that was and it's because they brought in different writers and so forth, and they pushed this agenda and kind of ruined the story.
Okay.
Uh, but I'm afraid I can't think of the name about that, name of that
Yeah,
TV series.
I'm not familiar with the premise, so I can't tell you what the show might be.
I bet if I use the internet right now, it'll come up with it very, very quickly. All I can think of is Fatherland, which is, of course is another, which is a book I've read about, which is also A Man in the High Castle. Thank you. So there are essentially two major alternative history stories about the Axis powers winning World War II. One is The Man in the High Castle, and the other is Fatherland. I've read Fatherland and watched the movie, and that's really great. The Man in the High Castle, the TV series went for 4 years, and the first 3 years I think are really good. The fourth year it was good in some ways too, but different writers came in and seemed to be pushing a woke agenda. For example, there was a resistance movement to Japanese occupied America, and and then later on a sort of an alternative black resistance movement comes in, and the predominantly white main resistance movement proves to be completely incompetent in the fourth season. This sort of silliness, that is,
Yeah.
where the black which and if they introduced this from the beginning, if they had say a separate black resistance movement, from the beginning, I think that would have actually been really interesting. But instead, they
Mm,
introduced them in the fourth season, hadn't been mentioned before, and then the predominantly white resistance movement, they kind of the black resistance movement captures a guy, hands them off to the larger white resistance movement, who promptly loses him. That sort of thing. It was just a
right.
bit silly.
Yeah.
So, but they were pushing this kind of a few things like that where I felt they were just it was just pushing this particular agenda.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was the Man in the High Castle, and yeah, I think that's what I was getting at. That they often push it in later on, push this sort of narrative later on, and I'm a bit afraid that that's what's happened with Outlander: Blood of My
Mm,
Blood. So
yeah.
I will continue persisting and see. I'll tell you what I think.
Mm,
I'll watch for a bit longer, but I'm
yeah.
a bit concerned about some of the lines I've been hearing. Um, might be sort of putting down the men a little bit. We'll see. We'll see.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And Zoe McClellan is the only
Yeah.
item I've got left.
Gotcha. I think we are good. So.
Yep. So as of August 2025, a warrant is outstanding for the arrest of Zoe McClellan in relation to charges of kidnapping, child stealing, and child custody deprivation. McClellan is a public figure who has appeared in numerous popular television shows, including Star Trek Voyager, JAG, NCIS New Orleans, and Designated Survivor. Her face is familiar to millions. It is extraordinary that she has evaded detection for so long. McClellan was reportedly residing in an apartment in River Ridge, Louisiana in April 2021 and may still be residing in the area. McClellan grew up in the area of Port Orchard, Washington State, and may have returned to the area. Some sources believe that McClellan has left the United States and is residing in Canada or Costa Rica. Prior to disappearing, McClellan was known to use the alias Sarah Chandler. Anyone with any relevant information, should contact the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. Thank
All right. Catch you next time, Rob.
you. Bye bye.